Okay, so now the manuscripts have been framed and hung. They've got a nice sort of place for themselves. We're in a position to return to the restoration of the book itself. So let's have a look at what we're dealing with here. Put the phone in its holder. So one thing I did last night just to get started here was I sisted the existing raised bands, which are clearly failed as either end as the boards were detached. So put these strong cords on here, just sew them into the existing bands, and then with this cloth here and some school glue, just really glued it all down strongly and left it overnight to set. The strength of doing it this way comes from the wrapping round of the cotton and it gluing either side of the band. It's not the way the band is sewn into the existing, it's not the way the cord's sewn down into the existing band, it's the fabric that really gives the strength here. Yeah, which basically means we can gently lift the book, which is a good sign that we're not going to have any great problems with board reattachment in the long term. So how are we going to do this? So as I've used before, I like to use this sort of canvas board. It has a lovely sort of rough surface that's very good for gluing leather or indeed paper, paste down onto. So the process we're going to use here is we're first going to, we'll measure and cut the boards, and you can see this board's actually going to be big enough to actually get both covers out of. So it's just a little, it's just a nice size. And in terms of the sort of height of the boards, there's probably a little bit sort of, I would say, 7 to 8 millimeters in metric, or somewhat under ½ an inch of excess at the bottom here, which actually interestingly roughly equates to the width of this seam. So I'll be able just to use this seam as a sight line and just cut this end off. Then what I'm going to do is cut the board to size this way. I'll probably end up with maybe just an excess of 1 inch or 2 in the middle. So this will look like a reasonably rough cut because the fibers come off when you cut these boards. So this will actually become the inner edge. So basically it will sit like this, with this as a rougher inner edge that's obviously hidden by the leather, and then this nice outer edge here with the sort of sharp edge that we like is going to be there. Once we've cut the boards, the plan of action is we're first going to drill 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, through which these will thread from behind through, like so. Then what we're going to do is, next to each of these larger holes, we're actually going to drill 3 smaller holes. And what we're then going to do is unravel the cord, and each of these one by one will be threaded through the smaller holes. So basically you'll see the big cord come through, it separates into 3, the 3 little ones go back through, they'll come through here and be glued down, and then they'll stick, and then this whole sheet of fabric will then get stuck over. That'll cover the unraveled cords, and that'll basically be the boards reattached at that point, and then we'll be able to move on to the leather binding, which will look very, very beautiful, I think, once it's done. So that's the plan of action. So the next step here is to trim this to size. We're going to take off this bottom edge, split it down the middle. So that's our next step. Okay, so I'm just putting the last of these, marking these out. And then, so that's about it. So we're now gonna drill these. I took the precaution of measuring each board individually because books are never rectangular. So you end up in a, as you can see, there's a lot of difference in the height and so on. And you know, we'll get them more or less. But there we go. So drill these holes and these triplets, and then we thread the board. So the advice I would give as we do this is make life easy on yourself. So the holes are drilled, and what I've done is I've sort of teed up lots of little strips of tape. And what I've been doing here is use each piece of tape to basically fashion the end of the cord into a point. So it becomes a little needle basically. And I just put it on like this. And just roll it round and round and round like that until it becomes this here needle, like that. Through the hole it goes. Like so. And trust me, that reduces to 30 seconds a process that would otherwise take 5 or 10 minutes and get you frustrated, depending on how the cord behaves. Then, once that's done, snip the end off. Now with these 3 cords, we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to do it individually. So you'll see what I'm doing here is I'm unraveling the 3 cords. So we have it like this. It just means there's going to be less sort of engineering showing through the leather. Once we put it on, it'll just lay flatter, which will be good. But then basically it's the same process. Just gather the end together like that. Bit of tape. Fashion it into a needle. Try not to bend said needle. And like so. So this we're just going to work our way down here, do exactly the same thing, do the same for the other board. Okay, here's the last one. So now the boards are loosely attached. This is actually a good opportunity to do a little bit of fine adjustment. Have a look at how the boards are situating against the text block. You know, are they a little behind? Are they a little in front? You want the edge of the board where the spine is to actually just sit down like this, nicely in front, and just have just a tiny bit of overlap here. If we look at this side of the book, it's set slightly further back, and you can see it's just sort of sticking there. So we can adjust it, just literally, we haven't glued anything yet. So now's the time just to adjust these guys very slightly. Going like that. And once they're done, just tighten them up. Obviously, once this is all glued down, you're kind of set, you're done at that point. So now's the time just to get it looking good. Okay, so there we go. This book now has boards once again. And I'm really starting to look forward to how this beautiful, nearly 500-year-old book is going to look in this lovely leather. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll trim these, probably leaving maybe just 1.5 inches here, and then we're going to glue this down flat and put the fabric up over this. Put lots of protection down here to protect the text block, and we'll glue the fabric down here, and then that'll really cement the boards as attached to the book permanently, which will be kind of great after all these years. Okay, what I've been doing here is I've just sort of splayed out the fibres, just sort of separate them a little bit. The glue will just take, and it'll just it'll be easier for the glue to take, and frankly they'll just lie flatter as well under the fabric. And then here we go. Get my school glue here. Focus first off just on the fibres, but eventually we're going to have to like slather this whole area in glue, because we need to stick down the fabric clearly. Just try not to keep them sort of lying flat where at all possible. Just keep an eye on the shape of the fabric, so you may need just to pull these fibres in so they're covered a little bit by the fabric, not sort of sticking out and showing as a wrinkle under the paste down when eventually you put it in. I've actually got a lot of fabric here. I'm actually going to, ordinarily I trim the fabric, but I don't really see a great purpose to doing that, to be honest. And I think the more the fabric is glued, I think that just the more robust it will all be. So what we then do is bring the fabric over like this. Now, one thing you may notice is just because of the way it's glued, you see this like little fold here. There's no harm at all in just snipping along where that fold is, like that. Oops. So that you just release that and then basically allow one to glue over the other, like that. And that'll just ease the way the glue kind of, how the fabric actually, yeah, like that. It'll be totally fine. Okay, so then bring it up. It's going to go like that. Again, it's going to overlap a little bit, so it'll just have an easier time just lying flat, basically. Similarly, this can go here. Then there's absolutely no reason you can't actually put glue on the other side of the fabric. Yeah, like that. Totally fine to do that. Obviously we've protected everything here on the text block, so it's all fine. There we go. There we are. So we'll do that here. We'll do this on the other side as well. And more glue actually into the fabric here. I wanted to make sure that it does adhere well. It comes through the fabric and actually adheres down onto the board like that. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that's this side done. We'll close it, and now same thing on the other side. And then the next step is we're going to be putting some thin card over here and gluing it here and just wrapping around. That's to make sure that when we put wet leather on here, we don't disrupt the glue that's actually held down on the fibre, the cotton here. That's really, really important. Okay, so I've glued on this sort of very thin sort of brown paper, which is basically what the leather comes from in the when it gets shipped to me. So that's now in place. The glue just is almost finished drying, almost. Just here, that'll just continue. we're in a position to start to think about what the leather might kind of look like. This is a really beautiful piece of leather, and I don't know if anyone else has more success than me, but I find it very, very difficult to find any source of calf leather the way in which you would see a book made, sort of bound in the 1700s. That kind of leather I just can't find anywhere. This is goat leather, which comes pretty close. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very thin, sort of conforms beautifully. So, if we sort of fold that in here, we can kind of think about how this is going to look ultimately. It's quite a big piece, so I want to try and preserve as much of the leather as I can for future restorations. But you can get a feeling for how this is going to eventuate. It's going to really be quite nice. So we're going to have 3 sort of raised bands here. Now these are really quite tall. So one thing I'm going to have to be careful of is I don't want to create like a wrinkle sort of going on here around the end, where basically the leather's been stretched over the spine and maybe not here. So I suspect I'm going to have to really put this in a very, very strong sort of vice situation. In other words, put it on as tightly as I can and then really clamp down hard sort of in between. Normally, if you've watched my other videos, you'll see that I tend to use a bit of a sort of a MacGyver affair with shims and ties. The ties simply aren't broad enough to actually cover this space here. So I'm going to have to come up with some other way of just putting force down here in such a way that I really, make the leather stretch while it's still wet. And then set in that position when it's dry. So it could be I need to put maybe a piece of wood or something. I have to cut something to shape that can just sit in there and really sort of push it down. Once we've sort of set up the vice. But anyway, this is gonna. I think I've got high hopes for this. I think this is gonna really end up looking quite beautiful when all said and done. So what I've done here is found a couple of bits of wood. This is a real sort of MacGyver operation now. Just by coincidence, this particular piece of siding, basically, like cedar wood, is exactly the right dimension for this middle bit. It is slightly tapered, but it just so happens that this distance here, which is 1/4 part of the length, is exactly what we need right here. So basically, I'll cut this in 4, swap each round so it sits sort of proud, and then I'll be able to use that to really force the leather. Obviously the leather will go underneath it, to really force the leather down and get a really nice adherence of the leather to the card. With it then coming up and showing the raised band in a really nice way. For the top and the bottom, an even more sort of Heath Robinson approach. I'm going to, the sort of wood in which these mouse traps are constructed, I'm going to obviously pull all the metalwork off, and then that's more or less the right dimension for here. So I'm just going to sort of cut like that. So I'll just cut that section off, and then I'll end up with a piece of wood that's about this sort of size. One there top, one there bottom, and then in the usual way use ties to really sort of bind them really tightly. And I think that'll be the way in which we have a really good snug fit for the leather. Okay, let's do this. So we have shims, the ties, are bits of wood that we'll use to really push the leather down on the spine. Lots of glue. Beautiful piece of weather that's currently wet. So we're now in a position to really make a go here. So as you can see, I protected the text block quite heavily, so we can make a start here. So let's just move the book out of shot just for a second here. Obviously I'm going to be folding over the top and the bottom like this. So the first step is going to be to do the actual margin of the leather. This is school glue. It really is harmless stuff. Like that. Do that. Make sure that's good. Do a nice good margin here, top and bottom. We'll just do one side first. So what we'll also do here is we're also going to put a lot of glue here on this card, here at the back, and then over this whole surface. But I'm not going to get any glue on the fabric, on the raised bands. I want to move quite smartly. Obviously, as I wet that card, there's a risk it could start to come unstuck itself, which I don't want to happen. So I want to do this relatively smartly. Put a little bit of extra glue just on the margins for the fold over here. Like that. It's in a good situation where I'm going to make sure the orientation is good. It looks like just work any bubbles out, obviously. Really no different to putting a cover on a new iPhone, something like that. What we're going to be doing here is folding this bit of leather down and under that gap right there, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is just carefully snip this on the diagonal here. Could go slightly, I was a little conservative with that, could go slightly further. There we go. And that's what we want to do. Again, you're folding in down in this gap here, like so. So that's the basic process. And then we'll continue to work this and round the other side.